Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Stanley Wu, and I am the coordinator for Omega and the director of the Resilience Project. Omega is a collaborative working on the global poly crisis and includes the Millennium Alliance for Humanity in the Biosphere at Stanford, the Kranz Foresight Analysis Nexus, or FAN initiative, and the Resilience Project. We're delighted to be joined by Dr. Tatsujiro Suzuki, who is a world leader in nuclear power plant safety, nuclear proliferation, and the abolition of nuclear weapons. After a brief presentation from Dr. Suzuki and a quick introduction from Joan Diamond, this conversation will be facilitated by Michael Lerner, who will lead us through a few questions and a conversation. Now, without further ado, we'll hand it over to Joan Diamond. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanley, and thank you, Tatsu. So our guest today has that rare skill and knowledge to confront nuclear issues from small but powerful technical and analytic detail to the broad existential implications and complexity of those issues. In our case, the issues are the vulnerability of nuclear power plants during war and the threat of nuclear war. Our speaker is a world expert in understanding nuclear safety in power plants from war, their design, age, accidents, and terrorism. And I probably forgot some of the other perspectives and windows. At the same time, he is a global voice on nuclear security and abolition and understands the dynamics of the possible use of nuclear weapons. Today, the invasion of the Ukraine brings back into focus the threat of nuclear release from an attack, accidental or deliberate, on a nuclear power plant, as well as the threat of tactical or strategic use of nuclear weapons. To guide us in understanding the current nuclear threat, we are honored to have Dr. Tatsujiro Suzuki, who will take us through three issues: nuclear threat and risk of nuclear weapon use, nuclear power plant safety, and how to reduce nuclear risks in the middle of the crisis. When reflecting on Tatsu's career, I realized that he is one of those rare leaders who has actually worked operationally on the ground, in academia, and in top government policy roles. So the full spectrum of these issues. Dr. Suzuki currently serves as both the Vice Director and a professor of the Research Center for Nuclear Weapons Abolition in Nagasaki University, RECNA. Every day in Nagasaki, he is reminded firsthand of the horrors of nuclear war. He is also the former vice chairman of the Japan Atomic Energy Commission. Prior to joining RECNA, Suzuki served as an associate vice president of the Central Research Institute of Electric Power Industry in Japan, was a visiting professor at the Graduate School of Public Policy, the University of Tokyo, an associate director for many years of MIT's International Program on Enhanced Nuclear Power Safety, and a research associate at MIT's Center for International Studies. He is also a member of the Executive Committee and Council of Pugwash Conferences on Science and World Affairs. For those who are not familiar with Pugwash, it is a leading international organization aiming to develop and support the use of scientific, evidence-based policymaking, focusing on areas where nuclear and weapons of mass destruction risks are present. It is with great pleasure that I turn the meeting over to Dr. Suzuki. Thank you, Tatsu.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I would like to start the presentation soon. Okay, let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about the imminent risks we face because of the Ukraine invasion. But even before the Ukraine invasion, I was actually concerned about the status of nuclear weapons situation right now. It is very serious. Now it's much more serious now because of the invasion. There are 5 points here today. First, even before the Ukrainian crisis, the so-called doomsday clock is the worst situation after the end of World War II. And so this is a very, even before the Ukrainian crisis, we are under very strong stress regarding the nuclear weapon risks. And then Ukraine invasion happened, and even just the nuclear threat or attacking nuclear power plants were against international law and must be stopped. This is very, very serious situation right now. And the situation in Ukraine, this is very unique. Ukraine doesn't have much natural resources, so they depend on nuclear power. 50%, more than 50% of electricity come from nuclear power. And they import natural gas from Russia. So their dependence in terms of energy dependence, this is also a serious situation. And that attacking and occupying Chernobyl site and Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, this is already very serious. I never expected that could happen also. A potential nuclear risk posed by this attacking nuclear power plants, there are several which I'd like to mention. First of all, already happened, power loss. You need power, always you need the power to cool the power plant, cool the nuclear fuel. So power loss will immediately, we are concerned that it will lead to the meltdown. Even just whole safety system, of course, depend on the power. So power loss is the most serious concern we have. And just the damaging safety system, also serious concern. And also loss of communication with the site and the loss of losing all the equipment to measure the whole safety systems. And also international safeguard system could be lost, and you cannot track the nuclear materials in the region. And finally, the operators' situations, fatigue, stress, and it could lead to the mistakes and lots of control over the safety system. So those are just the 4 points I'd like to raise the seriousness of this current situations. Finally, whether Putin will push the nuclear button is a concern. And we read, if you read the statements or his statements and the nuclear strategies they published 2 years ago, he could push the button. This is a very serious situation right now. So we have to do our best to avoid nuclear war at this moment. Okay, this is the doomsday clock. And you can see since 1947, as you can see, 1953, this is a hydrogen test called, this is the worst case. And then after 2020, 100 seconds, even worse than the 1953, because of this list of events that Bretton atomic scientists raised since 2020. And we will probably have to add Ukraine crisis next year, and it could probably worse than 100 seconds from now. And this is the poster we publish every year. RECNA publish every year the number of nuclear warheads all over the world, and compared with 2013, which we started, the number has been decreased. But if you look at the contents of the decrease, 80%, more than 80% of the decrease happened on the retired nuclear weapons, and it's deployed and stored only 14%. Actually, just last year, actually deployed and stored actually increased. So basically, the pace of nuclear disarmament is basically stalled, actually reversing the trend right now, because of basically two major trends that I like to focus on: modernization of nuclear weapons and development of advanced missiles. Because the number of decrease, the risk of nuclear weapons actually increasing. The left-hand side, this is the smart nuclear weapon developed by the United States, even before the Trump and Obama administration started. Obama administration tried to reduce the number of nuclear weapons, but to maintain the effectiveness of nuclear deterrence. So this is smarter nuclear weapon. The warhead can vary the power of the nuclear weapons, and the same size. Smaller means it's not necessarily the size is small. The yield is smaller, but it's the size is same. And this rotating how do you call wheel, it can manipulate the maneuver, and then there's a computer is inside, so it can track the target smartly. So it's basically more accurate, and it can very flexible nuclear weapons. And it already at that time, it raises the issue of the smarter nuclear weapon can be more easily used, because people think this is much smaller yield, and also it can precisely attack the target. The Russian response is this avant-garde, it is hypersonic missiles. You can they can also maneuver and then evade missile defense, and it can reach the United States less than 10 minutes probably or so. It's very fast, much faster than the ICBM. So this is basically those weapons will destabilize the nuclear balance. And also the new technology, cyber warfare. This is a report published by Nuclear Threat Initiative 2017. And the CIPRI issued the report 2019-2020, the impact of AI introduced in nuclear weapons. I don't want to go into detail, but basically the message is that the AI and the cyber technologies has to be included in the system, because it will improve, it's supposed to improve the safety of the nuclear weapon system. But at the same time, it could make it more vulnerable to the foreign attack. And also reliability could be misleading, because AI reliability is not so high yet. So basically the report itself is basically warning that these new technologies could also destabilize the nuclear balance. So this is, we are concerned before the Ukrainian crisis. So it's already very serious. Okay, let's go to the nuclear power in the Ukraine. There are 50 nuclear power plants, and you see this is the north area. It's very close to the border of Belarus, and this is the south. Already war is happening in those areas, so it's very close to the nuclear power plants. And those two power plants, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant site, two are operating at this moment. And this is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. You can see the river, the beautiful scene, and 6 units, total close to 6 gigawatts. This is the one of the largest nuclear power plant sites. In Japan, the seven units and 6. This is the largest one, Kashotekaya. In Europe, the French Grabari line, I think I cannot pronounce very well, but anyway, this is the second largest in Europe. But the point here is the huge amount of nuclear materials on this site. So this is a serious situation already. This is a Russian PWR, which is a little bit different from Western PWR. But safety has been improved after Chernobyl accident. And you can see, let's go to the stress. I read this report in 2015 after the Fukushima accident. They had a stress test, and basically they have improved the safety quite significantly. And if you read this report, somewhat assured that they have improved the safety very well. I don't want to go into detail, but this is stress test report is very useful. But however, if the military action happened and attacking nuclear power plants, all these safety tests doesn't mean much. The safety system could be broken very easily. And if you see this list of actions by the Russian military, I wouldn't say this is accidental. This is basically planned or intentional attack. So this is very serious. Although at this moment, fortunately, no radiological impact, no serious release from the site, but it could happen at any time. This video analysis by National Public Radio in the United States looked very serious. We thought that only the training center was attacked at this Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. But the video showed, no, they have they attacked other places, even the reactor building itself. This is very serious. It could have caused serious nuclear accident during the attack. They also attacked the power lines. And the problem here is they show very small portable heavy armor, RPG. If that's the case, I am concerned that the very heavy armed terrorist groups could also attack and occupy the plant. We cannot defend. We cannot defend. That's a problem. And it could penetrate the containment vessel, then destroy the core. This is very serious. And the power loss at Chernobyl site, fortunately that the power has been recovered. I think this morning they may have lost again, but I'm not sure. But fortunately, the IAEA said that the status of the plant is relatively okay. There's no imminent radiological risk because of the spent fuel pool. Spent fuel is cooled enough so that there's even without power, it could stay safe. But the problem is the IAEA said basically communication loss. There's no communication, and also the status of the operators. They are concerned about the status of operators. But I thought that there was a. I had some. I participated in one webinar that the Ukrainian nuclear safety expert mentioned that this is still a serious situation. I wasn't sure what was the problem, and she didn't tell us because she said that it was a confidential report. So I didn't know what it was. But this paper showed the pond, cooling pond near the power plant, and there's a damaged nuclear materials here, the bottom of the pond, and this has to be this water has to be pumped up from the downstream river. The water can this water could leak to the river. So if the power loss, this pump will not operate. It can be operated. So the water will be evaporate, and eventually this radioactive material could release to the air. So if I don't know how long this could sustain the water evaporation, but this could be a serious problem because the huge amount of radioactive materials is at the bottom of this cooling pond. So this may be another serious concern. To sum that the risk of nuclear power plants, the point is that the amount of radioactive materials, nuclear materials at the nuclear power plants is massive, huge, and more than nuclear weapons. And also from nuclear power plants, the amount of long life nuclear materials are much bigger than the nuclear weapons fallout. For instance, cesium-137, this is the problem still remains in the Chernobyl and also Fukushima. The amount of Fukushima from accident, but compared with the Hiroshima bomb, about 170 times. And this is only 1%, 3% of material coming from out of the Fukushima nuclear accident. So if the nuclear release happened at the power plant, the release of the nuclear materials, particularly long life nuclear materials, could be much, much larger than the nuclear bombs. So I already talked about the possible risk. And so basically, nuclear safety systems are not effective. You cannot protect by the military actions. And this is an additional protocol, the Geneva Convention. And if you read this Article 56, all these actions happening right now are against this international law and humanitarian law, basically. And Russia ratified this protocol. So this is already serious violation of this law. Okay, the nuclear risk. This is Putin's statement on nuclear threat. Probably you have seen this one from February 27th. But so far, they raised the alert status of the strategic nuclear weapons, but not other part of the nuclear weapon forces. The more we are more concerned at this moment is so-called tactical nuclear weapons, which could be used against Ukraine or NATO. Still restrained at this moment. And fortunately, also NATO and President Biden is also very restrained at this moment. So it's still balanced, and still the status is very quiet at this moment of the nuclear situation. However, if you read the statement of the Putin and also the nuclear strategy published by Russia in 2020, it is a serious situation, because if you see the July 2020 statement, in the case of aggression against the Russian Federation with the use of conventional weapons, when the very existence of the state is put under threat, they are willing to use nuclear weapons. And then he said, February 24th, it is not only a very threat to our interests, but to the very existence of our state and its sovereignty. It's very close to the sentence used in the 2020 nuclear strategy. So if you read his statement, Putin may be willing to use nuclear weapons. And just by coincidence, this past year, RECNA studied the possible nuclear weapon use in Northeast Asia. And 25 cases we listed. If you are interested, please download from this site. And the lessons from this study is that we thought that more accidental, unintended use of nuclear weapons is imminent, but this could happen intentionally. And the problem is here, the case also suggests that even if it's intended for the limited nuclear war, the future after the nuclear weapon is used, you never know what's going to happen. Also, it depends on the personality of the leader. It could go very well. It could end the war and lead to the negotiation, could lead to the peaceful negotiation again, but it could lead to the escalation and the end of World War. I mean, the end of nuclear. I mean, the lead to the nuclear war, global nuclear war. So this study was already scaring for us, but under this Ukrainian invasion, unfortunately, this report was becoming a reality. Is becoming a reality. Thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suzuki. That's a sobering and extraordinary presentation. I want to encourage all of you who have questions to please put them in the chat. I will have questions, but let me start with one from the chat from Robert Isaacson. Does Russia have neutron weapons?
I don't think so. It used to have both the United States and Russia, but I think they stopped it.
While we were chatting before we all came on, I asked you how serious you considered the situation, and you said extremely serious. You said perhaps the worst since the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's accurate?
Yes, I think it's fortunately it's not not bad as the Cuban crisis, but it's probably more serious than the North Korean crisis in 2017, that President Putin and Kim Jong-un started to fight over verbally, and we were concerned at that time also the Korean War could be imminent.
Your description is very sobering of the danger of a meltdown at one of the big Ukraine nuclear power plants. If there was a meltdown, a serious meltdown, when you talk about how much nuclear material is, how dangerous that material is, what would actually happen in terms of the distribution of radiation? What do we know about wind patterns? Just I'm naive about this. I remember what happened after Chernobyl, but what would happen if there was a major meltdown in terms of the distribution and the health impacts?
As I can show, this Zaporizhzhia power plant is bigger than the Fukushima.
Yeah.
They're roughly 10 times of the Chernobyl power plant. So if all nuclear reactors had a radioactive release, it's about 10 times serious. And the problem is that the 6 units, the lesson from Fukushima is that if one unit cause a meltdown, the operators cannot control the next plant because you cannot access to the site. So it could lead to the all meltdown, and that will happen in the Fukushima case. Once unit 1 had an explosion, hydrogen explosion, it is difficult for them to control number 2, number 3. So all 3 units had a meltdown. This could happen to this, Zaporizhzhia. So even just one power plant, one unit cause a meltdown, it could lead to chain reaction. That's my concern.
Is there a direction of wind, or is there a general sense of how the radioactive cloud would distribute itself over time? How would that play out?
Yes, the wind direction is very, very important. And unlike nuclear bomb is radiation goes, the circle. But the nuclear power plant case, it goes in the wind direction, and also rain. If it rains or snows, all the radioactive matter goes down. So if you look at the Fukushima evacuation map, it's northwest wind, and then it snowed at that time, on March 14th or 13th. And actually, wind direction changes all the time, and some of the time the cloud went to Tokyo area also, but it didn't rain, so it didn't go down much. So the wind direction and the rain or snow could be a serious, big factors.
And how does the radiation distribute globally over time, given differing wind conditions? In other words, does it distribute fairly equally, and over what period of time does it distribute?
Well, it depends also the height of the cloud also. I think eventually, even the small amount of radioactive material could lead to the wider area, and but the amount, again, it depends on rain and snow, and also time. In terms of time, it's probably could take a month to reach the global area, but yeah.
Joan Diamond reminds us that we had a conversation of the danger of fear and long-term mental health impacts of Fukushima. And before we came online, I mentioned to you that I watched an interview you did with the Atomic Heritage Foundation with an interviewer who was quite pro-nuclear from what I could tell. And you gave a very nuanced response that with Fukushima, that the actual health dangers were less than many people thought, but that the psychological and social impact was immense, and that Fukushima had basically changed your whole approach as a nuclear engineer to calculating risk and consequence. How does that play out in the situation that we are looking at here? In other words, you described this as extremely serious. How does that combination of the psychological and social consequences play out vis-a-vis actual health risks?
Well, first of all, the Fukushima case, the amount of radioactive material released to the environment is about 1/10 of Chernobyl. And also people evacuated much faster than the Chernobyl case. So that's why I said that the radiation risk is probably smaller. But still, we have to be careful about the impact. Thyroid cancer cases increasing in the Fukushima area for children. But in any case, the fact that if you are affected residents, you will be concerned. You never know when the cancer will happen to you. So the psychological stress is much more than the actual health impact. And also people evacuated, they left the house, they left their home without any warning at all. So they left everything left in your home. And all the I cannot, but basically they actually change their life completely.
Absolutely.
And they still cannot go back. Only 2 or 3% of the people who they are now allowed to come back, but they haven't come back. And it is
you mentioned cancer risk, but aren't there a wide range of other risks? And what are the genetic risks over time to survivors of nuclear effects? What in terms of later generations?
Well, at this moment, there have not been any so-called genetic disease caused by the radiation to the next generation. And but again, you have to keep on working to make sure that's the case. But the disease, as you said, there are different kinds of cancers, and even 77 years after the bombing, the new disease coming up from the Hibakshas. So this is a very inhumanitarian impact. You cannot eliminate. You never be assured you are safe against the radiation risk. That's the problem. Hibakusha always you have to be concerned about your health all the time, and that's very serious.
One of our listeners, and by the way, I really want to encourage people to add your questions. They're very thoughtful questions. Joe Andrade says, what can you say about the nuclear decision hierarchy under Mr. Putin?
I don't know much about the Russian situation, but if you probably the system is similar to the United States. So I don't think just one person can push the button. But of course, political system is different. Putin is much more powerful than the American president. And I don't know how many people could actually persuade Putin not to push the button. In the United States, even Trump can push the button, but it is possible that other people could restrain the whole nuclear weapon system. But I don't know. And also, there was a concern that Russia may have developed the so-called automatic response system, and without human involvement, and so-called doomsday machine. And so even just the misunderstanding of the NATO's or US behavior could trigger those automatic response systems.
Ross Brockwell asked about the possibility of global nuclear war. Does Russia's hypersonic delivery capability represent a significant enough advantage for them at this point that they might be tempted to use it while they have it, especially if their leadership actually feels the existence of their state is presently at risk?
Again, I don't know. I don't think the Putin will preemptive strike against the whole United States at this moment. There is no such rationale for doing that. If Putin will use nuclear weapons, it's probably only the tactical nuclear weapons against NATO or possibly in Ukraine. But again, there's no strategic reason for doing it at this moment, assuming he's rational. And so basically, he's threatening cohesion, so-called cohesion, and forcing other opponents to obey his policy. But again, our study of the Northeast Asian case suggests that depends on the psychological status of the leader. Any change of the other party's behavior could trigger the nuclear war. That's our concern. And any signals the United States or NATO could trigger that Putin, oh, I'm threatened, I should push the button. That's my concern.
We're getting so many good questions. Our colleague Asher Miller from the Post-Carbon Institute says, I've not seen much discussion about the assumptions that underlie nuclear power of long-term social stability, including the ability to maintain electricity and have access to fresh water constantly. How much is the possibility of societal collapse or drought factored into conversations you are aware of? And even if existing power plants are shut down, how long do spent rods have to be cooled? So that's a critical question I was wondering about too, because in your slides, and we've talked with Joan Diamond about this at some length, if the electric grid gets shut down and it's needed for cooling, a lot of the generators have a few weeks of ordinary fuels. And then, so I guess my question coming out of Asher's question is, how concerned should we be about the power grid going down and the current status of cooling, emergency cooling, if the power grid doesn't get back up in time?
Basically, after the Fukushima accident, as I showed the stress test, the safety emergency power system should sustain at least 7 days. That's a world basically standard. I think the Chernobyl case, Ukraine case also that satisfied the situation. And Chernobyl site only said 48 hours, which is 2 days. That's not enough. And but that because Chernobyl power plant had already shut down, everything shut down. So I think maybe 2 days is good enough. But basically, so 7 days, only 7 days. Okay, we assume power grid could come back within 7 days. In Japan's case, before Fukushima, only 3 days. And then we assume that under the normal conditions, 3 days is good enough to recover the power. So during the war, all these assumptions could be meaningless. 7 days is not long enough for ending the war. That's why I said the war, under the war situation, you cannot protect the nuclear power plant.
So this is a very serious situation. I'm going to read several comments together and you can respond as you wish. One was, how has Japan's agricultural and food security changed since Fukushima? A second from Leslie Meehan, this is terrifying information. I'm taking it in. Is there any government or scientific strategy being developed to protect the plants from further attacks during this invasion? And Robert Isaacson writes, and this is a wonderful question, in addition to potassium iodine, are there any other prophylactic nutritional supplements you would recommend to mitigate radiation exposure? And I wanted to ask on that final point, these potassium iodine, at least right now, is widely available and inexpensive. Given what we're facing, to what degree should individuals, schools, and others try to stock up on it while it is available? And is it useful for adults as well as children?
Okay, the first question is food contamination. We currently, even after 11 years, all Fukushima agricultural products go through the radiation check. Only 0.3% of the food are now beyond the regulatory limits. So once it is found, those food cannot go into the market. So at this moment, I would say all the agricultural products from Fukushima to the market is very, very safe, because any other prefectures is doing the similar test, only Fukushima. So if Tokyo, for instance, did the same thing, I would say 0.3% is probably kind of margin of error. So you could find some similar food that could be contaminated higher than the radiation limits. So I would say food contamination is becoming much less serious concern for us. Second question was strategy against military attack.
Yeah, are strategies being developed to protect the plants? No.
I cannot think of anything against the military attack. You have to just stop it. And yeah, it is very difficult.
And what about the question of anything in addition to potassium iodine? And my additional question, is it useful for adults as well as children?
I think main concern is children. So I would say the priority should go to the children. They are much more vulnerable to the radiation risk. So I don't know what are any other medicine or isotopes could be. You can eat probably seaweed.
Well, I mean, I've read about seaweed. Is that serious or not?
Yes, it is. We eat seaweed very well. So if you don't have any iodine, eat seaweed.
Okay,
and don't eat the mushroom. Mushroom contains concentration of radioactive materials. Mushroom is very high.
I want to come back to Asher Miller's question, because he is a serious expert on the global polycrisis. So, so the question really is about the possibility of societal collapse and drought, and whether you're aware of whether this is being factored into the conversations. So if there, I mean, just from what you've seen in Fukushima and what you've seen in the global literature, if one of the big plants goes critical and releases a lot of radiation, what would you anticipate would happen in the surrounding area, in Europe? What do we know about what happens societally in a polycrisis situation where everything is connected? What is your sense of what we would likely see?
Well, at least psychological and also economic impact is quite significant. You have to probably monitor the radioactivity around the globe, and also monitor the food coming from probably the region, in this case, Ukraine and Europe, at least for probably a couple of years. And that's more economic, psychological impact. And of course, how many, I don't know what area could be forbidden to live for at least for probably 30 years or more, even more. And I just don't know. But that's what probably, I don't know how many people will be affected in terms of health impacts. In the Fukushima case, after 11 years, no immediate, I would say no fatality at this moment caused by the radiation, by Fukushima accident. So it's a fortunate, but more than 2,000 people, or I think 3,000 people, so called accident-related death, which means psychological stress, and people moved from away from home, and because of the stress, people cause the serious illness. And so those whole indirect impact of the accident could be also serious. But I would say energy policy in Japan has completely changed, and people's perception of nuclear power also completely changed. Now it's almost 60% of the public wants to phase out nuclear power. Before, basically reverse. I would say at that time, before Fukushima, 60% of public wants to maintain nuclear power. So that kind of impact could happen.
In your interview with the Atomic Heritage Foundation, you spoke very movingly about, you said if you were to take one word for what was critical, it was trust between the people and the government and industry. And that once trust has been broken, it's extremely difficult to repair. And even though the government had made technical changes, it had not made the kinds of behavioral changes that were necessary to bring trust back.
Yeah, that's still happening in Japan. I don't think we have recovered the trust.
Yeah.
With the government, particularly in the nuclear area. So that's why people don't, even the restarting of the existing nuclear power plants is very difficult.
Yeah. Joan Diamond says, you have mentioned that there aren't shortcuts. We have to prevent use of nuclear weapons and damage to power plants. How do we do that? Do we have any agency in preventing the dark scenarios?
I cannot think of any. I think, first of all, we have to restore the communication from the plant and IAEA. That's the only route we have to get to know what's happening on site. And right now, IAEA don't have, I don't think that they don't have any direct communication with the power plant, the Polja and the Chernobyl. That's a concern, first of all. If they recover the communication, and if Russia allow IAEA to come down to the site, that will be very helpful. But it doesn't seem like, because Russian military occupied. They say they already own the power plant, and if that's the case, they're out of international safeguards. They can take out spent fuel anywhere they want. And so first of all, I think Russian military forces should return the control of the power plant to the Ukrainian government, and so that they can control the nuclear power plant safely.
Asher Miller continues to clarify the question, which I may have misstated a bit. My question was less about a single nuclear power plant going off and more about the mindset of proponents of nuclear power, including those who see it as a solution to the climate crisis. But it seems like there's an unspoken assumption built in that our societies will remain stable enough to maintain them long term.
That's correct. Global nuclear power plants, close to 400 nuclear power plants. We are operating all these plants under the assumption there will be no war, no attack, except that the nuclear terrorism we are concerned already, but no war. That's what we agreed in 1949. There will be no attack against nuclear facilities, even during the war. Same like a dam, also dam and the nuclear power plants and other area, for instance, biological facilities, for instance, laboratories. All these things should be excluded from the military attack. Now it's no longer the case. It's Russia. One of the United Nations Security Council permanent member is attacking nuclear facilities. This is not unexcusable. This is unacceptable.
Our colleague Dick Jackson, who was very senior at the Centers for Disease Control and longtime friend in this research, writes, persons with iodine deficiency in areas like Ukraine have low iodine diets.
I see.
When I was at CDC, we worked hard to get those areas to iodinate table salt, which worked well to reduce high rates of iodine deficient goiter and to help protect infants from iodine deficient hypothyroidism, which can result in lifetime retardation. Pregnant women and children absorb much more dietary iodine than do adults. So Dick, thank you for that. Joan Diamond went on to ask you, are people in Japan willing to reduce energy consumption as one pathway to reducing dependence on nuclear power?
We have done that right after the Fukushima accident. In 1 year, electricity consumption dropped, peak demand dropped up roughly 20%. That's inconceivable, but it's coming back very quickly. Right now, just basically, but electricity consumption has been declining gradually, because not because of the behavior itself, but also the efficiency of the system improved quite significantly. And also industrial structure will change probably in Japan. So I would say electricity consumption will not grow much already in Japan. I think that's happening in most industrial countries. And also renewable energy is growing very fast in Japan too. But at this moment, still more than 80% of the power comes from fossil power plants in Japan.
I'd like to ask you about the future of nuclear power. I've read about, and not at all expert in, but the development of small nuclear generating devices. I don't know whether they were fusion or regular, but essentially small plants that would be floated in the ocean, and if they went critical, they would go down, and they'd be radioactive, but they wouldn't disseminate. Do you believe that given the climate crisis and everything else, but also the questions that we've been asking about the assumptions that Asher Miller spoke of about stable, political systems and not wars, do you believe that there is a viable future for nuclear power with either existing technologies or the new ones for the future?
Well, yes, small modular reactor, so-called, currently under development, may have a future because it is considered to be inherently safe, which means that even without power, the reactor could be shut down very easily. I mean, cool down naturally. And also some of the fuels, the melting point is much higher, so it will never melt. And those ideas have been floating actually even after the 3 Mile Island and after the Chernobyl accident, but unfortunately never be realized, and basically because of the economics. But also safety regulation is very conservative. Nuclear safety regulation all over the world is very conservative. So getting a license of this new type of power plants takes some time. So I would say it might, but we are talking about climate change action within next 10 years or even 20 years. And even if small modular reactor come online successfully, I don't know how many small modular reactor come online within next 20 years. It's probably small contribution. So at the best, nuclear power could contribute to the climate change, but it's very limited. So I wouldn't count on the success of nuclear power to fight against climate change. And more likely, the economics of nuclear power, even for this small nuclear power plant, actually smaller modular reactor could be more expensive. So economics of nuclear power is unfavorable in the next 20 years or so. So I think for climate change, next 20 years is critical. So I am a nuclear engineer, so I like to see the contribution of nuclear power. But my observation and reality that even the nuclear power contribution, even if the best, is limited. Share of nuclear power is declining. Right now, it's only 10% of the global power production. And at the best, it remains the same, not increase. And so I would say nuclear power's contribution could be limited.
So let me begin to try to summarize some of the things I've heard and ask you. And by the way, I want to encourage anyone who has any last questions to please ask them, because we're moving toward the end here. But I've heard you say that at this moment, the danger of some kind of nuclear incident, of nuclear war, but above all, of damage to power plants in the Ukraine, that the danger is more critical than it's been for a very long time. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the last time that you saw it this critical. That the danger of an accident caused by the war in the Ukraine is very high, and that the longer the war continues, the greater that risk will be.
Yes.
And it looks like the war is going to be with us for some time to come. That if there is a meltdown, that the consequences both of the actual radiation danger and the fear and social chaos that can come from this are very great. That in your experience with Fukushima, that the fear and the end of social trust was at least as powerful as the actual medical consequences. And that there is no evidence that any agency or anyone else is moving to safeguard the plants in the Ukraine, and that this is, at least for me, I have to say, because I've been watching the news carefully, I would say this nuclear danger has been underestimated in terms of the media attention. That we hear a lot about the bombings of hospitals and all kinds of terrible things taking place, but we certainly don't hear as much about the nuclear threat, which may well be one of the greatest threats of all. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, that's basically what I'm trying to give a message today, and
Yeah.
I am very concerned.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I still have a hope that the Russian military forces are sane enough that they will not cause any serious accident. And so far, they have been trying to do that. They cut the power lines, but they are allowing them to restore the power lines again. And they sent Rosatom nuclear engineers to the plant to control the nuclear power plant. So I see some of the positive those signs. So if they are intentionally trying to cause any serious accident, they could have done that already. So my concern is basically accidental, unintended consequence of this war, and still that risk remains very high.
Stanley Wu asks, what nuclear scenario does Dr. Suzuki think is most likely to happen? What scenario concerns him the most?
I will not try to give any projection or probability of the scenario, but my concern is, as I said, unexpected event could lead to any serious nuclear accident or any possible nuclear war, and that's my concern. And the best case is, of course, the end of war, or at least to make sure that the nuclear power plants are safe. And even if the war continues, they agree to, Russia and Ukraine agree to maintain the status of nuclear power also. That kind of thing is more positive scenarios. But even if they agreed, the war is unpredictable. That's my concern. If something happened, there's no way to control it. And that's my concern.
Robert Isaacson writes, California is still getting hit by Fukushima radiation and seawater at alarmingly high levels that will inevitably increase as the main bulk of polluted Pacific Ocean water reaches North America over the next 2 years. Sea mist carries and deposits these radioactive particles in land where they accumulate. Any thoughts?
As I said, that the distribution of radioactive material is not equally. It could reach somewhere with some concentration, but overall, the amount of material released to the environment is not huge compared with Chernobyl. So I would say yes, we are concerned about those so-called hotspots, and could cause some of the radioactive level high. It could going down, of course, gradually. But already 11 years already passed. So from now, the declining of the radiation level is very, very slow. The first 10 years is go down very quickly, and then slow, very slow. So current situation will continue for the next 20 years or so.
For people who want to become active in this area in which you are so expert, are there organizations that you would recommend that we either support or engage with, your own institution included? How can people who want to join the fight for a nuclear-free future act most effectively?
Everybody should raise a voice. Not just experts. I keep telling that the newspaper media that anyone can raise a voice, and it could be heard by the Russians or military forces eventually. And I think it's very important for us right now to raise the awareness of this nuclear risk and make sure that the people, the Russian citizens and the Russian military forces could hear the voices from the world. And this activity should not be allowed. And it has to be stopped. And that's my message.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Joan Diamond and Stanley Wu to come back online here. And Joan, any last thoughts or reflections for Dr. Suzuki? This has been, I think, an extraordinary presentation. And I think it will be viewed by a lot of our colleagues who weren't able to be here today. I cannot thank you enough, Dr. Suzuki, and
thank you
I look forward to further engagement.
Yes.
Joan, any thoughts or reflections?
Only two. One, I want to thank you very much for joining us and on such short notice. And secondly, I hope I can still feel the thankfulness when I'm lying awake at night.
Yes.
Stanley, last thoughts.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, Joan. And most importantly, thank you, Dr. Suzuki. This was an extraordinary conversation. And I think most of us are leaving this with a deeper sense of how complicated these issues are. So we very much appreciate your time here with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
again, Dr. Suzuki.
Take care.
Right.
And thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it. We will post a recording of this webinar on our website, omega.ngo and resilience.org. If you're interested in receiving more invitations like this, you can register on our website. And we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Please stay tuned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay,
Be positive. Be positive. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.